this conversation, we must ask ourselves, yes, how did we get to this point in the first place? And the parties engaging in this conversation. Yeah. In reality, or what has been projected, is that it is Azimio and Kenya Kwanza. Let me believe or bring myself to the fact that Azimio are talking for the Azimio electorates, and Kenya Kwanza is talking for the Kenya Kwanza electorates, because that should be the position. But I would want to introduce a third thing, that in reality this is a talk between the ruling coalition Kenya Kwanza, Azimio, who are represented in the talks, and the people who are spectators, but very important and very vital. So we were not on the table, but we may be the menu. We were called to give our suggestions, but first politicians, they want to secure their interests. Right now, the Azimio went in the guise of the public interest and demands. There were demonstrations. And why were people demonstrating? The electorates were demonstrating against the high cost of living. Looking at the point when these conversations began, to this point when the report is to be tabled, a lot of things have changed. But one thing that has changed and has immensely changed upward is the cost of living. There are so many taxes that have been introduced, and there are so many that are proposed, including raising the land, the land service charges. When if you are, for example, if you want to register a property, you'll have to pay more than what you were paying, almost double, yes, what was being paid. Yes. And you see, there are certain silent features of good taxing system. You must not tax to an extent that you leave the taxpayer crippled. And that is what the electorates are crying for. They need the taxes to be reduced. Right now, Simba, having 1,000 shillings is nothing. It can only afford you breakfast, and that is a family of 2 or 1. And that is not a proper breakfast. I'm talking about those who are living, who are living below there are people who are living below $1, yes, a day. So you do not expect to dish out positions to the opposition and create the position of a prime cabinet secretary, whom we have not seen his role per se. Yes. Then the plight of the many million Kenyans are not factored in. So there is a possibility that if these, and Azimio have also seen this, yes, that if these are not, the demands of the electorates or the demands of the people are not factored in, then they will have no basis, because they found their strength on the people, or from the people, the reaction from the people, the demonstrations and the cries. But most importantly, the reason as to why I gave the analogy of 3 participants, the Kenya Kwanza, the Azimio, and the electorates, is that right now, none of those political formation, if at all, if there is any that is advancing or championing the needs and the real concerns of the electorates, then it could be up to 30%. But 90% is they're championing their own interest. Yes. That is why there is a lot of resentment both in Kenya Kwanza electorates and within the Azimio electorates, now Kenyans. Because you see, we are only divided along our tribal lines when it comes to looking for votes. But I had Nandi, the former Nandi Hills MP, he was speaking passionately on the cost of living. And one thing he said is that when you go out there to buy fuel, there is no fuel that is reserved for those who are shareholders and those who are non-shareholders. When you go out there to buy food in the supermarket, there is no shelf that is reserved for the shareholders and the shelf that is reserved for the non-shareholders.
That's true.
And that is why Kenyans will unite. And that is why the ardent followers of the Kenya Kwanza government are actually revolting. You saw from the report, I was reading through the Standard,
yes,
and it was very clear that very few have shown interest for the UDA grassroots elections. Why? The reason is that they are protesting the high cost of living. And as we speak, the elected members of parliament from Kenya Kwanza cannot face their people because they had a very good and lucrative manifesto, but the implementation has been below 2%. I say below 2%, not based on any other, but it can facts can speak for themselves.
Yes.
They promised that in the first 100 days, they would reduce the cost of unga. They would reduce the cost of fuel. In fact, I could quote the deputy president verbatim. Tukiweka Biblia chini hivi, the cost of unga would go to 100 bob. I think he said that.
Yes, sir.
But right now, what is the cost of unga, Simba? I believe they are also buying unga. And when they are asked, they will always come and blame the Israel-Hamas war. They will come and blame Uhuru Kenyatta. The other day, Uhuru Kenyatta came out, guns blazing, and told them, no, you cannot keep blaming me 1 year into office. They set their own tax targets. They did not meet it, despite the high taxation. We find billions of money disappearing in very mysterious circumstances.
Yes.
And there are people, the other day,
Yes.
the minister or the cabinet secretary for petroleum, that is energy,
yes,
I mean, was heckled at his own home turf, Bomet. He was being heckled not by the Luos, not by the Kambas. I speak of the Luos and Kambas because when we had demonstrations last time and there were guys who were shot in Kitengela, we were told that Luos were ferried from Kisumu to demonstrate and as such they were shot. But now this is a scenario,
yes,
where the shareholders are heckling their representative, their energy CS.
Like you say, the shareholders themselves.
Yes. It means that
Yes, sir.
things are not
Yes.
that easy.
In the scenario, Simba, in this scenario, and
yes,
but take a minute on this before we jump into the next issue this morning, that there's a new coalition jumped in with these fresh demands at the report writing stage. Not all this time at the Bomas of Kenya, more than 2 months, Simba, at the Bomas of Kenya, just to weigh in on these issues.
yes.
But at the report writing stage, that's when they jumped in and said, well, guys, gotta